So I have to start with this story. Last week, I sat across from a friend at a coffee shop, and she was completely unraveling over her dating life.
Yeah.
And this is someone who is normally so logical, so successful, the type of person who has a plan for everything.
Planner type, right.
Exactly. And she looked me right in the eye and swore up and down that all she wanted was stability. You know, a partner who communicates, who shows up, a good guy.
The dream on paper.
Totally.
Yeah.
And she was even seeing someone like that. He checked every single box, stable career, emotionally available, the kind of guy who brings you soup when you're sick without even asking.
Okay, so he sounds perfect.
He was perfect. But then, and this is the twist, she tells me, almost in a whisper, that she ended things with him.
Oh.
Yes. And who did she leave him for? A guy she openly, her words, described as chaos.
Oh, wow.
The quintessential bad boy.
Yeah.
Unpredictable, a little arrogant, takes 3 days to text back. You know the type.
I think we all know the type.
But as she's talking about this second guy, her entire demeanor it shifted. She went from looking exhausted to leaning forward, her eyes wide, and she's describing this undeniable electricity, this spark.
Even though she knows he's a terrible bet.
A terrible bet for her long-term happiness, and she admitted it. It was like a jarring contradiction to see right in front of me, this rational woman making what looks like a completely irrational choice.
Creating safety for volatility.
Voluntarily. And she had tears in her eyes, calling herself broken and hypocritical for wanting the wrong thing.
But you're saying it's not a personal glitch.
That's what struck me. Seeing that instantaneous shift from praising the good guy's safety to being visibly magnetized by the bad boy's danger. It wasn't a personal glitch. She was, without knowing it, acting out this brutal millions-of-year-old evolutionary calculation.
I'm confused.
She was caught in the crossfire of a biological phenomenon, something called strategic pluralism.
And that is exactly our mission today. We're going to unpack that seemingly irrational contradiction, that deep, persistent tension between wanting stability and being pulled toward volatility.
Right. And for anyone listening, if you have ever felt that conflict, you are not broken.
You're simply host to an evolutionarily stable conflict.
We are doing a deep dive into strategic pluralism in the dating market. We're looking at why that contradiction my friend felt, that pull toward chaos, that often feels so much stronger than the pull toward safety, why it isn't a personal failing.
It's the expression of two ancient, conflicting, but, and this is the key, equally stable evolutionary strategies playing out in a modern world.
So we're going to use the language of what? Behavioral ecology and game theory.
Exactly. To understand why these two strategies coexist in our species, and crucially, why neither one ever manages to fully wipe the other one out. The whole framework is built around these two opposing forces. Let's call them the DAD strategy and the CAD strategy.
Okay, the DAD strategy, that's the first one. The good bad strategy. This is the sure thing option, right?
Totally. It's focused entirely on resource provision, long-term commitment, and stable parental investment.
The goal is just creating the most secure, predictable environment possible for raising kids.
And then you have the second one, the good genes strategy. This maps right onto that CAD or chaos profile your friend was talking about.
This is the one that bypasses immediate stability for what? Genetic quality.
High genetic quality. It focuses on cues like social dominance, physical attractiveness, all those traits that signal underlying robustness and genetic advantage.
That's the spark, the electricity, the volatility.
That's it. And the central question we're trying to answer today is why both of these types, the stable DAD and the volatile CAD, exist and succeed in the dating pool at the same time.
Because if one offered a clearly superior reproductive outcome, evolution should have weeded the other one out a long time ago.
Exactly. And the answer is that the environment, both social and ecological, is constantly changing. It dictates which strategy offers the highest payoff at any given moment.
Their coexistence isn't an accident.
It's guaranteed by the mathematics of conflict. Specifically, a concept known as the Evolutionarily Stable Strategy, or ESS.
Okay, let's unpack this ESS idea. It sounds highly technical, but if we boil it down, what does it actually mean for the existence of CADs and DADs?
It really is the mathematical reason that strategic pluralism exists. Think of it this way. An evolutionarily stable strategy is just a strategy that, once it's common in a population, is so successful
that nothing else can beat it.
That's it. No rare alternative strategy can successfully invade and overthrow it. It's what keeps the system in a state of stable diversity.
So if the entire dating market was made up of dads, a rare CAD could just show up and, well, he'd clean up. There'd be no competition.
He'd reap huge benefits, and his strategy would spread like wildfire until the system balances itself out again.
It explains why you always have this mix of behaviors.
Precisely. And to really understand why the CAD and DAD strategies maintain this kind of stable balance, we have to look at the classic game theory model for conflict, the hawk-dove game.
The hawk-dove game, or I think most people know it as the game of chicken. It's maybe the easiest way to visualize this deep-seated conflict.
It is. Just imagine two drivers speeding toward each other down a single lane. The options are simple. You can swerve, which is the dove strategy.
Or you can stay straight, which is the hawk strategy.
And the payoffs just illustrate the pension perfectly. The best possible outcome for you is to play hawk stay straight, while your opponent plays dove and swerves.
You win. You get the status, the resources, you look tough.
But the catastrophic outcome, the absolute worst-case scenario for both of you,
The crash.
that happens if neither of you yields. That massive cost is what prevents everyone from just playing hawk all the time.
And that's the critical constraint, right?
Wow.
If everyone played CAD or hawk, the system would just constantly crash and burn.
But if everyone played dad or dove, the resources would be too easily exploited by any rare CAD who showed up. It's a system built on strategic tension.
This specific kind of conflict, it's defined as an anti-coordination game, isn't it?
Yes, an anti-coordination game. It's the opposite of a coordination game where you both benefit from choosing the same strategy, like, say, meeting at the same restaurant.
Here, it's mutually beneficial for players to adopt different strategies. One of you has to yield, and one has to stand firm.
That difference is what creates the stability. And this unstable dynamic where the best outcome for you depends on the other guy making the opposite choice, it yields multiple solutions. Game theorists call them Nash equilibria.
A Nash equilibrium is that stable state where neither player can do better by just unilaterally changing their mind.
Right. And the game shows two pure strategy Nash equilibria: swerve, straight, and straight swerve. One player is the CAD, the other is the dad.
But that doesn't explain how an entire population sustains both types of people. It just explains a single interaction.
That's where we get to the core of strategic pluralism. The solution to the hawk-dove game also includes a third, mixed equilibrium, where both strategies can coexist stably within the population.
And ESS theory tells us that this coexistence can happen in a couple of different ways.
It can. The first is what's called strategy mixing. This means every single individual is internally capable of being a CAD or a dad.
So they just choose which one to be.
They choose, maybe not consciously, but they choose based on the specific situation or the environment they're in.
So my friend's rational partner, the dad, he might have the potential to be a CAD in a different context. Like if he suddenly got a huge promotion and felt his own mate value just skyrocketed.
That's the idea, exactly. Or the stability could come from strategy polymorphism.
Polymorphism, meaning different forms.
Right. The population is stably composed of dedicated individuals. Some are just always hawks or tads, and others are always doves or dads. Their strategy is more fixed.
And for complex human behavior, it's probably not one or the other, is it?
It's almost certainly a mix of both. You have a polymorphism of predispositions, which are then expressed through plastic strategies, or mixing depending on the circumstance.
That makes so much more sense. So the stable population isn't defined by everyone being the same, but by the proportion of dads versus CADs reaching a kind of tipping point.
A point where neither can successfully invade the other. Too many CADs and they just keep crashing into each other. Too many dads and they get exploited by the few CADs left. It's a self-regulating system.
What's also key in nature, though, is that perfect symmetry is, well, it's rare.
Very rare. In animal contests, an ESS often only emerges when there's some kind of uncorrelated asymmetry that lets the players distinguish their roles.
Like the classic example of territory. You have the owner versus the intruder.
And that asymmetry, who was there first, it breaks the tie and leads to a stable outcome. The owner is biologically driven to play hawk and defend fiercely because they've already invested in that resource.
And the intruder is incentivized to play dove and yield because the cost of fighting a vested opponent is just too high.
It creates a predictable owner wins rule, and it resolves the conflict without constant catastrophic crashes.
You can see how that maps directly onto human relationships. The established long-term partner is the owner. The social and emotional cost of trying to invade that territory is incredibly high, even for the most dominant CAD.
What's really fascinating is how this mathematical framework, this hawk-dove structure, it extends far beyond just animal conflicts and human mating. It explains the stable coexistence of diverse strategies across all kinds of different human systems.
Okay, let's explore that. I want to see how this fundamental conflict resolution mechanism plays out in, really high-stakes human decisions.
One of the most famous applications is in political conflict, under the name brinkmanship.
Brinkmanship.
The philosopher Bertrand Russell famously compared the nuclear standoffs of the Cold War, specifically the Cuban Missile Crisis, to a global game of chicken.
That is a terrifyingly accurate comparison, the ultimate high-stakes game.
Russell argued that these eminent statesmen, risking the lives of hundreds of millions of people, were in fact playing chicken. Neither side could afford to look weak or be labeled the chicken, but neither side wanted the worst payoff, which was total annihilation.
So the whole strategy is built on introducing uncontrollable risk to force the other side to swerve.
You signal an absolute, unwavering commitment to play hawk, maybe, by moving your forces or issuing a non-negotiable ultimatum, even if that commitment risks total destruction. You're trying to compel the other side to be the one to back down.
The ultimate expression of the anti-coordination game on a global scale.
And you see it in places that are far less catastrophic, but just as frustrating, like corporate life. They call it schedule chicken.
Schedule chicken. I'm laughing because I think every single person listening has experienced this.
I'm sure they have. It happens when two or more teams on a project claim they can deliver their part unrealistically early. They're playing straight, hoping the other team will be the one to swerve and take the blame for the eventual schedule crash.
So Team A tells management they can finish their part in 2 weeks, knowing full well it's going to take 4, because they assume Team B is doing the exact same thing.
And they're trying to gain the status benefit of being the fast team. The consequence, of course, is contagious schedule slips because of all the dependencies.
The underlying psychology is identical to the hawk-dove game. It's about avoiding the cost of admitting weakness while trying to achieve the status of high performance.
You're signaling your resource holding potential, your RHP, but in a modern cubicle context.
It's a powerful illustration. Whether it's nuclear war, project management, or choosing a mate, the mathematics of rivalry just force these diverse, stable strategies to emerge.
And to tie it right back to the biology that governs mating, we see this exact same contest structure in tiny animals too. For instance, in parasitoid contests, where female wasps fight intensely over a host.
A host being an indivisible resource, they need to lay their eggs.
Yes, so they're essentially playing hawk-dove over parental resources, and the intensity of their conflict is governed by 2 key variables that dictate their optimal strategy, just like in human mate choice.
Which are?
Resource holding potential, or RHP, which is just their physical ability to fight their body size, their strength and resource value, or V, which is how valuable that host is to the wasp at that specific moment.
So for the wasp, the value is linked to how urgently she needs to lay her eggs.
Exactly. A larger wasp with high RHP, fighting for a host that she urgently needs, meaning high V, is highly likely to play hawk and commit to that fight. It shows that strategy is context-dependent.
It's based on personal costs and benefits.
Which leads us directly back to the human dating market, because that resource value, V, in human contests, translates into adaptive necessity, the urgent need for either good genes or stable resources.
This is where we get to the core of my friend's decision. We've set up the mathematical framework for why CADs and DADs coexist. Now let's look at the mechanism for when a woman's brain decides that genetic quality, the CAD, suddenly outweighs investment, the DAD.
We're moving into what's known as the dual mating hypothesis. This addresses the classic problem that ancestral women faced. They needed commitment and resources for their own survival.
But they also needed the highest possible genetic quality for their children's resilience.
It's the ultimate evolutionary insurance policy. The good dad provides the shelter and the food, but the good genes from the CAD provide the biological armor plate.
The health, the vitality, the attractiveness that helps the child survive and compete.
Precisely. The hypothesis suggests women evolved a strategy where they secure resources through a long-term partner, the dad, but might engage in short-term mating to secure genes that are superior to those of their committed partner.
So what are the specific traits women are adapted to look for in those good genes, CADs? The ones that generate that spark, that volatility?
They are powerful outward signals of genetic quality, Things like obvious physical attractiveness, masculinity cues, a strong jaw, wide shoulders, a muscular athletic build, and then behavioral cues like social dominance, intelligence, creativity.
These are traits that are costly for a man to produce and maintain.
Very costly. They often signal high underlying health because they suggest his genes are robust enough to handle the developmental cost of high testosterone.
So that appeal, that electricity my friend was talking about, it's so potent because it signals such a critical adaptive advantage. But why would she abandon the guaranteed safety she said she wanted?
Because our mate preferences are not static luxuries. They show what we call evolved plasticity. The brain is constantly running this adaptive calculation, and it shifts strategies based entirely on environmental cues.
So the context dictates which of the two problems is more critical for her potential offspring right now.
Is it securing resources from a dad, or is it securing resilient genes from a CAD? It's like a subconscious triage system.
And there's experimental evidence for this.
Powerful evidence from what are called forced trade-off tasks. Researchers will mentally prime women with cues that mimic different ancestral threats before asking them to choose between different partner traits.
So what were the threat cues? What happened when they simulated say, a sickly environment?
When women were primed with cues of pathogen prevalence, so stories or images suggesting a high risk of disease, they showed a massive shift. A significantly greater preference for traits indicative of genetic quality, the CAD traits.
And this came at the expense of the dad traits.
At the expense of parental investment. The brain subconsciously reasons, if the world is full of disease, my child's survival depends more on superior genetic resistance than on a steady supply of food.
Genetic quality becomes the highest priority resource.
It does. So the need for a physically dominant, genetically robust man goes up specifically when the world feels more dangerous or disease-ridden.
That makes the CAD an adaptive necessity in that context, not just a preference.
It does, and the reverse was also true. When the researchers primed women with cues of resource scarcity, so suggesting economic instability or famine, they showed the opposite shift.
They went for the good dad traits.
Heavily, focusing on parental quality and resource investment, even if it meant tolerating lower genetic quality.
That is a perfect linear trade-off. It's not irrationality. It's an adaptive calculus that's dictated by immediate environmental pressure.
Right. You're essentially asking, should I invest in superior architecture for the house, the good genes, or should I make sure the pantry is stocked and the roof doesn't leak, the good dad?
That analogy captures it perfectly. And what's fascinating is that this trade-off is often tied to internal neurobiological and hormonal mechanisms.
These are the proximate causes that tell the brain which strategy to activate.
So how does our internal biological state reflect this trade-off?
If we look back at those parasitoid contests, the level of aggressiveness and the motivation to play hawk is linked directly to the female's reproductive state. Hormones that stimulate egg maturation increase the subjective resource value of the host to that wasp.
So if her body is fully primed to reproduce, the stakes are higher and she becomes more aggressive. The body is internally dictating the urgency of the need.
Exactly. The hormonal readiness to reproduce dramatically increases the stakes, that V, and it alters her optimal strategy towards aggressive resource acquisition. And in humans, we see a parallel shift, particularly in women's self-perception.
You were talking about the changes around ovulation.
Yes. A woman's self-perceived mate value reliably increases around ovulation when she is at her most fecund. She feels more attractive, more desirable.
And this feeling acts as a kind of psychological tracking adaptation.
It signals to her brain, I am at my peak desirability right now. I can raise my standards.
So she starts to demand more from the mating market as a whole.
That's the key.
Yeah.
This increased desirability elevates her standards across the board, which includes a greater focus on masculine features and high-status cues.
It's not strictly that she only desires CADs for their genes during this window.
No, it's that her overall standards are higher, which might make the high-status, high-genetic quality CAD seem more attainable or more desirable than the average dad. It's a general raising of the bar when the body is ready to maximize reproductive success.
That makes the shift much more nuanced than just ovulation equals CAD. It's more like ovulation equals greater bargaining power. Therefore, I am prioritizing the rarest, most genetically desirable traits.
That's the critical distinction. These physiological shifts are the link, the proximate mechanism that translates environmental input, like disease risk and internal state, like fecundity, into the specific behavioral preference we see in the dating market.
Okay, we've established the mathematical rules and the biological triggers. Now let's look at how these CAD and DAD strategies really manifest in the complexities of modern dating.
Right?
Starting with the short-term strategy. We mentioned that the strict good genes at ovulation hypothesis often has mixed results. So if women are engaging in short-term mating, what is the most powerful function if it's not strictly for genes?
This is a major area of contemporary study. While that dual mating hypothesis has a really strong theoretical appeal, the evidence for strict cycle-dependent gene acquisition is often weak, or the effect sizes are small.
So what's the better explanation?
The more robust and, frankly, more strategically practical explanation is the mate-switching hypothesis.
Mate switching. That sounds less like romantic spark and more like transactional risk management.
That's a great way to put it. This hypothesis suggests that short-term mating serves a strategic function far beyond just acquiring genes. It's a flexible strategy for maintaining options or actively upgrading one's long-term partner.
So cultivating a safety net or testing the waters for an upgrade.
It can be both. Short-term mating can be used to cultivate a backup mate in case the current partner proves unstable or disappointing.
Or can be an emotional bridge. Finding someone more desirable makes it much easier to actually go through with a necessary breakup.
It's partner replacement and insurance all rolled into one.
That puts relationship dissatisfaction front and center as the driver of this strategy, rather than just biology alone.
Absolutely. And the empirical data strongly supports this. Relationship dissatisfaction is an incredibly powerful predictor of female infidelity.
And this link is so strong that it's not found for male infidelity.
Correct. Men's reasons for short-term mating are often purely rooted in a desire for sexual variety. Furthermore, women's interest in other men, when it's driven by dissatisfaction, is independent of where they are in their ovulation cycle.
That's a critical distinction. It directly refutes the idea that all short-term mating is just about seeking superior genes during a fertile window. It's about strategically optimizing one's long-term relationship.
Exactly. When women report the benefits of extra pair mating, they often cite these practical strategic reasons. They found a partner more desirable than their current one, or the affair made it easier to break up.
They're screening the new person as a potential long-term partner.
I see the parallel now with my friend. She chose the CAD not necessarily because his genes were superior, but because the contrast between his volatility and the dad's stability provided the necessary electricity, the emotional drive to execute a difficult decision.
Leaving the stable but maybe boring path.
It acts as a disruptive, high-energy catalyst for change. Short-term mating for women is therefore strategically pluralistic. It serves multiple functions at once.
Acquiring resources, gathering information, facilitating an exit, it's a versatile tool.
It is.
Okay, let's pivot back to the DAD strategy, which is the long-term priority. Despite the allure of the CAD and the necessity of mate switching, how powerful is that enduring preference for stability and resources?
It is paramount. The preference women have for men with economic resources and the cues that indicate success in acquiring them, like ambition, industriousness, high social status, this is the most overwhelmingly supported finding in all of mating research.
And this preference isn't just a cultural norm from a specific time or place.
No, it appears to be a biological imperative that transcends cultural or economic differences. It's a near universal priority, documented across 37 different cultures, spanning diverse economic systems and varying levels of gender equality.
That's fascinating. Even in highly egalitarian societies where women are financially independent, the preference for a high-earning man remains robust.
It does.
So if women don't need the resources for their own survival anymore, why does the preference persist?
The persistence suggests that the preference isn't just about personal economic reliance. It's about securing future investment, status, and protection for potential offspring.
It's insurance against resource scarcity.
An ambitious, high-earning man is a signal of stability and the capacity to buffer against future environmental shocks, whether they're financial or ecological.
Let's get into the hard data on this. How big is the gap in priority between men and women when it comes to long-term earning capacity?
In studies measuring the minimum percentile at earning capacity people would accept in a long-term mate, the difference is just stark. Women universally set the bar high. They require earning capacity in the 70th percentile.
So they're looking for a top 30% earner.
Yes. And men.
What about men?
Men, on average, prioritize earning capacity only in the 40th percentile for a long-term mate.
That means women place a premium on a man's financial potential that is roughly 3 times higher than the premium men place on a woman's.
That is not a subtle preference. That is a fundamental difference in what constitutes mate value between the sexes.
And it gets even more dramatic in experimental settings.
It does. One powerful study measured men's attractiveness to women based on small variations in their salary. The researchers found that women were roughly 1,000 times more sensitive to salary when rating men's attractiveness than men were when rating women.
1,000 times more sensitive. That number is just staggering. A small increase in a man's reported salary produced a massive shift in his perceived desirability.
It shows just how finely tuned the female mating mechanism is to cues of resource acquisition and status. It demonstrates that the evolutionary mandate for securing resources and protection for the long term remains absolutely paramount.
And it's not just resources, it's also about physical protection.
Right. The CAD strategy is also about securing a bodyguard, a man who is physically capable, brave, and formidable enough to deter aggressors and defend the family unit.
So the CAD strategy is defined by 2 interlocking needs: economic stability and physical security. It's the full package of long-term investment. Now let's flip the coin and look at the CAD strategy from the male perspective. If women are using short-term mating to switch partners, what drives the success of the male CAD?
For men, pursuing a short-term mating strategy, being the CAD, is highly correlated with higher mate value in the mating market.
So it works?
It works. Men who are described as having unrestricted sociosexuality, so a high desire for sexual variety and casual sex, they tend to have higher perceived success, receive more compliments, and, critically, have a greater number of actual sex partners.
So the very attributes that make a man a CAD, the unpredictability, the dominance, a touch of arrogance, they're not just irritating flaws, they're successful components of a strategic, high-gain mating phenotype.
And these behaviors are often correlated with those physical cues of genetic quality we talked about.
Yeah.
A higher shoulder-to-hip ratio, an attractive face, a muscular build, and high circulating testosterone.
And status and resources play a role too.
Yes, men with higher status tend to have a larger number of short-term sex partners. The CAD phenotype is a reliable signal of high genetic and physical capacity.
And the most compelling evidence that these male desires translate directly into action comes from those classic field experiments.
The ones that illustrate the huge sexual asymmetry in mating psychology. These were the field experiments in the US, Germany, and Denmark, where a stranger of the opposite sex would approach people and ask, "Would you go to bed with me?"
The results are just a stark, dramatic illustration of the CAD strategy in action.
A staggering percentage of men, around 75% across the various studies, immediately consented to the sexual request.
And this is contrasted with the female response, which was, what, 0%?
0% in the initial US study and 0% of single women in the Danish replication. This dramatic divergence reveals the fundamental difference in the cost-benefit calculus for short-term mating.
The minimum biological cost of that interaction for the man is 1 act of sex. For the woman, it could be 9 months of pregnancy and massive investment.
That colossal asymmetry drives the male imperative for variety and the relaxation of standards in short-term contexts. The male CAD strategy is successful precisely because the biological costs are low and the evolutionary benefits of spreading one's genes are so high.
Okay, so given that these strategies are ancient, how does the emergence of modern cultural technology, massive cities, and especially the internet impact our evolved psychology? Does the ability to meet millions of people disrupt this CAD dynamic?
This is a crucial area where modern life interacts with ancient wiring. Ancestrally, humans had extremely small mating pools, maybe a few dozen individuals they might encounter over their entire lifetime.
Modern cities expanded that pool significantly.
And now, internet dating has exploded the potential pool to millions, theoretically giving everyone access to the 99th percentile CAD or the 99th percentile DAD.
But does it change the underlying psychology?
The core finding is counterintuitive. The underlying evolved sexual strategies, the CAD trade-offs, the priority for resources, the desire for sexual variety, they persist.
So cultural technologies are not rewriting the core adaptive conflicts.
No, they're simply being invented to implement these millions of years old strategies more efficiently and on a massive scale.
So dating apps aren't creating new behaviors. They're just giving us a massive search engine to find high-value mates who fit our current strategy.
Absolutely. Think about the CAD strategy for men. Maximizing sexual variety by relaxing standards. Dating apps allow men to scroll through hundreds of profiles rapidly, fulfilling that core desire for variety in a high-speed, low-cost way.
And for women, we discussed how short-term mating can be about resource acquisition. How does technology implement that ancient function?
Well, consider the modern manifestation of sex-for-money exchanges, which now operate on a massive scale through the internet. These can be seen as modern, technologically facilitated expressions of that ancient female adaptive function of securing immediate economic resources through short-term mating.
The technology just provides a huge accessible marketplace for that transaction to occur.
That interpretation shifts the focus from modern morality to ancient utility. It suggests we're using our high-tech tools, our phones, and our algorithms to solve the exact same primal adaptive problems our ancestors face.
The technology just increases the market efficiency for expressing strategic pluralism.
It creates a highly efficient market where both CADs and DADs can find partners who are currently primed by their environment or their internal state to prefer their specific strategy.
Now, this whole analysis has been built on the framework of evolutionary game theory, which is often criticized for being too simplistic when applied to complex human behavior.
Right.
What are the key academic challenges to this entire CAD ESS framework?
The main critique centers on a concept known as the phenotypic gambit. This is the necessary simplification that's used in evolutionary game theory to make the math actually work.
The simplification being that we assume that behavior, the phenotype, or the observable strategy, evolved as if it were controlled by simple genetics.
Exactly. We treat the DAD strategy or the CAD strategy as these stable, distinct units of behavior.
And population geneticists worry about that.
They do. They often raise concerns that the underlying biological reality, which involves incredibly complex genetics, epistasis, recombination, that all of that could destabilize the neat equilibrium predicted by ESS. They worry the simple model might be a little too clean for the messy reality of genetics.
So they're concerned that if we knew the full genetic code, the stability we see at the behavior level might just fall apart.
That's the concern. However, ESS theory is robustly defended as the most pragmatic and necessary tool we have. In fields like behavioral ecology, where the detailed genetics of these complex behaviors are still completely unknown.
ESS allows us to analyze the selection pressures.
It allows us to analyze frequency-dependent selection and determine the local optimal behavior. It's the best map we have, even if we know the terrain underneath is more complicated.
It provides an essential theoretical framework.
It does. It clarifies our thinking about why certain behavioral mixtures, like the coexistence of CADs and DADs, are so fundamentally stable over vast evolutionary time, regardless of the precise genetic mechanisms that produce them.
This has been a true deep dive into the calculus of choice. Let's bring it back to my friend at the coffee shop and synthesize this for her and for you, the listener.
Her dilemma, that seemingly illogical switch from the stable DAD to the volatile CAD, it wasn't a sign of confusion or some personal flaw.
It was a rational, contingent expression of strategic pluralism.
The data shows us that humans have evolved in ESS, an evolutionarily stable mixture of strategies. And this mix is dictated by conflicting adaptive problems, the constant need for resource security clashing with the desperate, temporary need for high genetic quality.
So when she was happy with the stable guy, she was activating her adaptive phenotype geared toward long-term resource investment. The environment probably signaled that stability was the highest priority.
And when she switched to the chaos, she was activating the phenotype geared toward maximizing genetic quality, maybe triggered by environmental cues, or the internal confidence of high mate value, or just sheer strategic dissatisfaction with the old equilibrium.
And the stability of these strategies isn't maintained because they're easy, but because they represent the mathematically optimal responses to rivalry and environmental instability.
Her decision to trade safety for electricity was the activation of an ancient, adaptive behavioral strategy designed to maximize her offspring's success across a fluctuating and dangerous world.
It's a harsh truth, really. Our mating decisions are often less about finding a soulmate.
And more about engaging in an ongoing, high-speed calculation of genetic versus resource payoff.
The proliferation of dating apps and all of our modern technology, it doesn't change the core adaptive conflicts humans face.
It simply provides a vast new high-speed marketplace for us to express and calculate those brutal millions-of-year-old trade-offs between a secured future and the raw power of good genes.